We are very lucky to have Edwin here, and I'm excited for the next hour or so where we'll get to chat with him and hear about his journey. There are a few things that we're going to cover. One is just the Surge story. I think a lot of folks are excited to hear about Surge because Surge has been flying under the radar for a little bit. Kind of a true unicorn in all senses of the world, entirely bootstrapped to over $1 billion in revenue, has obviously been one of the really important players in the ecosystem to get us to the point where we are now today with AI models. We're going to talk about -1. We're going to talk extensively about the frontiers of data and the future of data, and a little bit broader about just AI and AGI. So excited for this. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe just to start, love to have folks get to know you a little bit. And as some of you who have met me through SPC know, one of my favorite questions is to ask somebody where they're from and how that sort of shaped them and how they view the world. So Edwin, I'll ask you the same thing. I know you grew up sort of small town in Gulf of Florida, but maybe tell us a little more about where you grew up. How did it shape you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a really small town in Florida called Crystal River, it's actually known for being the land of manatees. So that's probably the most known thing about it. And honestly, I think the way it shaped me the most was that, kind of funny enough, there wasn't that much to do. And so what I ended up just doing as a kid was just reading a ton. And so I would just read everything about math and language and a ton of science fiction, which really inspired me. And so I actually love that everything that I get to do today is actually just a grown-up version of all that.
I love that. It's amazing how the intersection of all three of those definitely explains what you're doing today, and we'll come back to it. Another just like fun little icebreaker. Obviously, your company plays a big role in a lot of the products we use today. I'd be curious for you, just personally and professionally, what is your AI stack? What AI applications do you use and love?
So I definitely use ChatGPT and Claude a ton. And I will tend to use Claude for a lot of professional work projects. Like, I think it's really good at drafting documents, especially when you use Sonnet 4.5. And then I actually love its knowledge base feature. So every time I have a bunch of documents in its knowledge base about a company, I'll just use it to basically help draft a lot of things. And then I'll tend to use ChatGPT for a lot of personal projects, like planning a trip or restaurant recommendations. And honestly, it's replaced a lot of my Google activity for me. And then probably the third biggest one I'll use is actually Google's Notebook LM. Like, I actually find it really useful for reading papers, where I'll just take a paper and dump it into Notebook LM, and then just listen to a bunch of podcasts while I'm walking around the city.
Notebook LM definitely helped me prep for this, so we're on the same page there. I would love to see how you experienced AI products, because I'm sure you're constantly evaluating them as you're using them. You're just like, oh, look at this response.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. The number of times I notice a hallucination, either about something I'm researching, and then I'm like, okay, hey, I'll send it to one of our customers, but hey, how can you guys go fix this? So it's pretty fun.
I'm sure you see some responses where you're like, you should have bought more data from us. Just one quick icebreaker, because I do think it frames maybe some of the other parts of our conversation. A large part of the Surge AI mission is about accelerating AGI, but in a way that sort of brings humanity to it. Just quickly, how do you define AGI as a framing for our conversation? And then we'll sort of get into the -1 story.
So the way I think about AGI is I really think about the big, giant problems that we wanted to solve for humanity. And also how are we building systems that are actually benefiting our species as a whole? For example, I think a lot about how to build AI that will eventually help us solve poverty and cure cancer and solve the Riemann hypothesis. These are really the big picture questions I think about when I think about long-term AGI. But then I also worry about whether it is benefiting us as a species or not. I'm really worried actually about the future of education. Are people going to want to continue learning in the future when we have all this easily accessible information at our fingertips? Or are they just going to watch all these AI slop videos all day and will become these Wall-E-like automata? It's kind of funny. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually using ChatGPT a ton. And I was actually having it help me write some emails. And so I spent 30 minutes with it, getting it to help me craft a perfect email. And it created 10 iterations, and each iteration got better and better. And eventually it did. It gave me the perfect email. And I sent it. But then I was like, what did I just do? I spent 30 minutes crafting the perfect email when in the past I would have just spent 10 seconds and sent it. And did it matter at all? Like, sure, we have these systems that are incredibly smart, but I just worry that they're making us lazier and lazier as a species, and we're not quite optimizing for the wrong things.
Yeah, 100%. It's like the more extreme version of, as a native San Franciscan, I still pull up Google Maps every time, even though I can map myself. Let's hold that in our heads, because I think like a lot of the rest of our conversation will be about AGI. I just wanted to kind of throw it out there because I know it's so central to what Surge does. But let's kind of dive into the Surge story. I think many people are very excited to hear how this all came about. We have kind of a saying here at SPC that like our journey is really lines, not dots, but what gets reported and what's shared and all of our understanding tends to be these dots. Like Surge is billion plus in revenue. We had no idea what that line looked like. So let's kind of rewind. Take us back to, was it 2020 or 2021?
We started in 2020.
Okay. Take us back to 21. Maybe walk us through what was inspiration for Surge. How did it come about? Who did you build this with in those early days?
Yeah, so I used to be a researcher at a bunch of the big tech companies like Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And the problem I kept running into over and over again was that it was just impossible to get the data that we needed to train our models. So for example, I used to work on search at Twitter. And I remember one of my first projects was I just wanted to build a sentiment analysis classifier. And so this was like 2011. So super simple problem even at the time. Like all you need is 10,000 tweets labeled to train your models. But the problem was our human data systems, they were just two people off of Craigslist working 9 to 5 in their office. And so it took a month for us to get even just to get started. And then we waited a month and they were just labeling these 10,000 tweets in a spreadsheet. And it took forever because, yeah, it's just two people. And then we finally got the data back and I looked at it. And it was just completely junk. Like you look at it and it was obvious that these two people, they didn't understand slang at all. They didn't understand online Twitter culture. They didn't understand memes. They didn't understand hashtags. And so everything was just completely mislabeled. And so I ended up just having spent a couple weeks myself going through these 10,000 tweets, labeling them. And then I went to Google and then I went to Facebook and I just kept running into the same problems over and over again. And so GPT-3 launched in 2020. And it was kind of, I basically kind of realized that if we wanted to build models that would eventually go to the next frontier, so building models that would be able to write code for us and models that would be able to write poetry and use tools and yeah, solve the Riemann boluses, I realized that we really needed a new, fundamentally different kind of solution that was actually focused on quality, focused on complexity, focused on all these advanced use cases that none of the data solutions out there were focused on at the time. And so we basically started Surge a month later.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get back to data quality because that'll be a large part of our conversation. But it's still a problem today, and a lot of this is just like opening up the file and looking at whether or not the data is any good. And sadly, not enough people in industry do that. And obviously, you're trying to help solve that. I'd be curious in the early days. We talked a lot about like the -1 to 1, and it's not linear. Maybe share a couple examples of kind of that early journey, and maybe specifically one of the things to share would be, was there a moment in which you were like, we're actually onto something, and were your aspirations to build a huge company in the early days, or was it just let's go deliver the greatest data to AI companies and other people building applied AI?
Yeah, so so we actually started in June of 2020. And so this is right in the middle of COVID. And our CTO, Andrew, I think is somewhere in this room. As I remember, he would actually come to New York maybe every couple of weeks. And we just walk around the city and talk about all these things that we wanted to build. So it's kind of funny, but I actually remember COVID as this kind of idyllic time because it was just so much exploration and so much jamming on ideas that, yeah, it was just so much fun. And I think one of the big moments for us was one of our early customers was this researcher at Google. And he was working on a new search and discovery algorithm. And he'd been running into all these incredible data quality issues the same way I had. Like he'd been iterating for 6 months, working on his data pipelines. He was forced to make all these ridiculous data simplifications just because he couldn't get the quality that he needed. And so we got introduced to him, and like even in just a single week, he just saw that our data was 10 times better. Like we built a data set for him that was 10% of the size of his previous data sets, and he was already able to beat all of his previous systems. So I remember just jamming with him for 3 hours on a midnight on Friday, And he just had all these ideas for all the other things I wanted to build because of the data that we were able to give him. And I just love that because that was always our dream at Surge. Like we wanted to just accelerate research and open up all these new possibilities. And so that I think that was a really, really key moment for us.
Just out of curiosity, when you're walking around New York with Andrew and tossing out ideas, is there one that comes to mind that was pretty far field from what you're doing now?
So probably two things. So I remember us debating a lot about what the name should be. And I always had this mindset, I wanted like a kind of a more consumer-facing name. So I always had this idea that we should just be called a hot sauce instead of Surge.
Ooh, hot
So
sauce. I like that.
I'll be curious if people like that name better. Because today people get so confused about our name, especially because we don't own Surge.ai or something else. So people would just sign up for the wrong site. But
What is it? What is the URL? What's the URL today?
So our URL is actually surgehq.ai, not Surge.
Okay.
So if anybody here has gone to the wrong website, go to the right one.
Data point that the name and URL doesn't really matter in all cases.
Yep.
That's very cool. Very cool story. Let's talk about one of the most notable things about Surge, in that it has been entirely bootstrapped from day one, which is pretty incredible. Talk to us about whether or not that was a deliberate choice, how you arrived at that conclusion, and then we can kind of dig into like how that's impacted you as you build this thing.
Yeah, so it was definitely deliberate. Like I think people often ask me, did I help you or did I hurt you? And I'm actually really, really glad that we didn't raise. Like I think not raising gave us a lot of freedom to really optimize for the long term instead of building all these short-term objectives. Like I think one of the things that's always driven me kind of crazy about Silicon Valley is that it's almost, I think, a status game for a lot of people where they just end up raising for the sake of raising. Like I have a lot of friends and they start companies, and it's not because they have some great product idea that they fundamentally believe in. It feels to me like a lot of times they're just raising. I mean, they tell me this as well. They're often just raising because they don't know what else to do, and they just want to raise $10 million so they can tell all their friends and family. And I'm really glad that we never played that Silicon Valley game. Like, it was always kind of ridiculous to me. Like, what did you dream of doing when you were a kid? Was it starting a company from scratch and digging into the code and digging into your users, digging into your product every day? Or was it explaining all of your decisions to VCs and jumping on this giant PR and fundraising hamster wheel? And I think it made things more difficult for us because people weren't learning about us through the kind of fundraising hype that you get when you raise. And it meant that the only way that we were going to succeed was by building a 10 times better product that researchers would spread by word of mouth. But I'm actually really glad that we did it because it meant that our customers, like our early customers, they were buying us because they fundamentally believed in the power of data. They fundamentally believed that high quality data was what you needed. And they weren't buying us just because they happened to read about us in some news article.
Do you think any of your early customers needed the validation that it was venture backed, or didn't really cross your mind and they just looked at the data and your collection methods?
I don't think it mattered for them. Like I think we were lucky in that we sell to a very technical audience, right? Researchers who really dig in themselves. And so I don't think it was necessary for them.
That might have been a good question for the audience, because I think we actually have a couple of people here who were customers for years and have built some of their products with your data. But yeah, clearly it didn't get too much in the way. As you reflect on like the journey today, and I know there's a lot more of Surge, what's sort of like a counterintuitive lesson that you've learned from the path you've chosen, either being bootstrapped or just the way that you've built this company?
So I think one lesson that I would tell myself early on would be to always focus on these big 10x problems instead of worrying about things that only move the needle by 10%. Like I remember in the earlier days when we were trying to find our initial customers, I would often like think and spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, should I send this email at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m.? And should it be one sentence long or should it be 3 paragraphs? And I think the right approach was just to try to build something so amazing that all of that became noise. And yes, I think that was a big lesson that I learned.
I guess on the bootstrap front, there's the validation that your customers needed. But as you built this team, and I think it's a team of 100, did you run into issues with there needing to be validation, that it be venture backed or whatever else, or ultimately you're attracting the right people who are there for the mission or for just the intellectual curiosity of what you were building?
Yeah, so in terms of hiring, I'm I also think it really benefited us not to have the kind of like the Silicon Valley hype behind us. Because I think what happens when you're that kind of startup and you get a ton of this like fundraising news, the people who tend to apply to your company, they're people who maybe jump around just looking for the shiniest name on your resume. And instead, we have been lucky in that pretty much everybody who's joined us, they fundamentally believe in our mission. Like, it's kind of crazy, but we have a 99% retention rate across our company, which I think is just kind of unheard of, given that we've existed for 5 years. And I think that's because so many people that join, they really, really believe in our mission, and they're not joining us because they're just looking for like another branding to add to your resume.
Cool. Well, that's fascinating, and thanks for sharing some of the -1. And I know, a lot of people have been very keen to hear about some of the early days. I guess let's talk a little bit about Surge today, and a lot of how you describe it is as a research lab, but you have to hold in your mind kind of balancing it, both being a research lab and a very commercial business. I guess let me start by, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but why don't you describe to us how you think about Surge as a company and a business, and then maybe like help us understand that tension that you're trying to navigate.
Yeah, so I think the funny thing is that I actually very rarely think about ourselves as a business. Like, I actually never look at our financial metrics, which is kind of funny. Like, I think my team gets a little bit crazy at me because I don't quite pay attention, but I never actually quite pay attention to that. And so I think of this as a lot more like a research lab, like you said. And I think the difference is that when I think about our goals, it really is achieving AGI and doing whatever it takes to enable that. And that contrasts with how you think when you're a startup, which is you kind of just care about your valuation and you will do whatever it takes to increase that valuation, but we behave very, very differently. And so I think the differences there are a couple of differences. Like, one is we actually just don't care about short-term revenue at all. Like, we will sometimes actually actively tell our customers when we don't think that they should buy certain data sets from us because we don't think that they'll be effective for our models. Like, one of the things that we really care about is that we're always viewed as a long-term partner for our customers, and we're just doing whatever we can to look out for their models and to make sure that we're delivering amazing ROI for them instead of just trying to juice short-term revenue metrics. And then the other piece goes back to hiring. So like I was saying, I think we really, really look for people who are fundamentally interested in our mission and in research and in achieving AGI. Like, what we don't look for is growth hackers who create all these dark patterns in order to get users to sign up in order to juice your engagement metrics. And I think that all that stems from my background as a researcher myself. Like, I often think that I would much rather be Terrence Tao than Warren Buffett. And I think that really reflects in how we think about ourselves as a company, where we'd much rather get cited in a research paper than like appear on some TechCrunch headline.
So a lot of these human-powered AI data companies are sort of opaque from the outside, right? Like, kind of understand the inputs and the outputs, and it's data that people are buying to train models. But when you think about the company, it could be some part labor marketplace, it could be some part tools and technology, it could be some part the actual data. I'd be curious, and let's do some part research. How do you think about the components of what you're doing? How do they all interplay? And I guess, how do you balance there's some operational bits to what Surge does, and there's obviously a lot of research.
Yeah, so the way I think about ourselves as a company is, in some sense, a lot like Apple, where one of the amazing things about Apple is that it combined the hardware and the software.
Mhm.
So in the same way, I think we've always been proud of the fact that we build a ton of technology to make sure that we're delivering amazing quality, to make sure that we can handle millions of annotators and wrangle them. But then we also have that operational piece, which I think is really, really important as well. Like, I think people often underestimate the human data side of things, where they just think that people are smart. And so you just take people off the street and throw them at the problem, and they don't consider all of the ways in which people try to cheat your systems, or all of the ways in which, if you ask people 50 questions, that's almost just too much cognitive burden for them. So I think one of the things I love about us is that we're kind of like a very interdisciplinary company, where you have all of the math and computer science and statistics on the technology side, but then you also have all this work around just thinking about human behavior and like cognitive science and linguistics and all that on the operational side. So I always love that aspect of our company.
Got it. Just to understand the business a little more, I guess two additional questions. On the kind of the labor side of it and the human part of it, which I think is very central to what you do. Can you share a little bit more about how you attract world-class talent, like incentivize them and retain them? Because I think some of the surgers, that's what you call them, surgers, you have on the platform are these incredible people who are kind of top their field. So maybe like help us understand that, maybe a few anecdotes of even particular individuals.
Yeah, so we literally look for the smartest people on the planet. Like it's literally Stanford PhD students and Harvard professors and even Fields medalists. Like I think we actually have the largest group of the smartest people on the planet working for us, which is kind of incredible. Like for example, I was actually talking to this Fields medalist who actually works on platform, and I was talking to him a few weeks ago. And what he was telling me was that the reason he works on our platform is because there are all these unsolved problems in number theory that he wants to see get solved in his lifetime. And he believes that the only way to make that happen is by training these AI systems to get smarter and smarter so that they can collaborate with him on solving all these unsolved problems, which I think is just amazing. And so I think there's a couple principles that we have when we think about the worker experience. So one is that we care a lot more about your measured abilities than your credentials. Like, yes, we look for the smartest people in the world, but just having a PhD isn't enough. Like, you have to have all of this creativity and the mental fortitude and just like this overall diligence to make sure that you can find all of these problems that models fail at, and then the ability to teach them all these interesting ways. So I think you really, really need to measure people's abilities again, as opposed to just considering them warm bodies so they can throw out a problem. And then the other aspect is that we want to be the most intellectually rewarding job that you can have. Like I often think of places like MIT and Harvard and Stanford, right? Like you have groups of the smartest people in the world and they're working collaboratively to push the frontier of knowledge. And that's exactly what we need to do for AI. Like if you're a theoretical physicist and you train your entire life to push the frontier of physics, then great. That's exactly the type of person we need on our platform. And so we want to be the best job in the world for them. So we try to build our worker experience in a way that makes it very collaborative and just like fun, and they can learn a lot. So that's one of the.
Do you have surgers be IRL? Is that something you do for them, or it's all remote?
It's all remote right now. I've thought about sometimes how fun it would be to have all these meetups and just to meet them in person, but
Do a big
never yet.
surge bash or something. It'd be fun. I guess on the other side of it, I have read, this is like a plug, you guys should all read the Surge blog. There's some really interesting stuff there. But I'd be curious, what's some research that you guys are doing that you're most excited about and are able to share?
So one of the things I'm really excited about is all of our work on benchmarks and leaderboards. Like I think one of the terrible things that's plaguing the industry right now is that there are all these terrible benchmarks and leaderboards out there, like Ella Marina. So I actually think Ella Marina actively sets back model progress in so many ways. And so for those who don't know, Ella Marina is basically this popular online leaderboard where anybody around the world, so all these random casual users online, they go and they enter a prompt and they get 2 responses and they vote on which one's better. But the problem is they're just doing this for fun. And so they're not reading the responses. They're sort of not fact checking them. And so what happens is that a model can just completely hallucinate everything, but it will look impressive because it adds a bunch of emojis and adds a bunch of bolding and adds a bunch of markdown formatting. And it's really long, so it sounds like a confident seeming expert. And these random users, they're like, okay, yeah, this looks very impressive. So even though completely hallucinated, which they won't realize, they'll upvote it anyways. Like it's a lot like going into a grocery store and buying a tabloid. And what drives them crazy is that a lot of researchers, they tell me, like, yeah, they actually hate all these leaderboards as well. They know how actively they set back model progress as well. What they tell me is the only way they're going to get promoted or the only way they'll get their bonus at the end of the year is if they increase their Ella Marina rank. And so that's Ella Marina. But I think there are a lot of these other contrived academic benchmarks out there as well that kind of lead to the same outcomes. And so I'm really excited about a lot of our work to build better benchmarks.
Yeah, while we were on that topic, obviously a big part of Surge and the product or value you deliver is around evaluation. And you really do lean on this network that you have of like the smartest experts. Can you share a little bit more about how you guys view evaluations? And you've written about this in the blog, but maybe for the audience, it'd be useful to understand how you guys think about it differently.
Yeah, so when we do evaluations, like we really believe in the power of human evals. Like think a lot of people take all of these kind of like academic benchmarks or auto evaluations, and they don't realize all of the ways in which kind of like optimizing for the wrong thing can set your models back. So, like, how to put it? I'll give an example. So there's like popular, or there's a benchmark out there called IF eval, and so it's an instruction following evaluation. And if you actually look at the prompts, which I think a lot of people maybe just don't take the time to do, but if you actually look at their prompts, there are things like, hey, can you create an essay for me? And every fifth letter, just capitalize it. And it's just wild that this is the kind of thing that people are optimizing their models for. And that's what happens when, like, the reason this happens is because, sure, you can create a program to automatically evaluate it by checking every fifth letter and seeing if it's capitalized. But if you're really trying to optimize your models for creativity and usefulness and moving beyond this very robotic notion of LLMs, then I think you really, really need human evaluations to really evaluate them.
I think that's a good segue. I mean, we've definitely tiptoed into the meat of our conversation around data quality and the future of data and kind of your philosophy around it. We've talked a bit about benchmarks and evaluations, but I guess if we zoom out, obviously AGI and the future of AGI sits at the center of everything that motivates you. And you have been adamant and correct in my opinion, obviously, that we would have a garbage in, garbage out problem. And so you're about delivering the highest quality data. How do you think about quality? What dimensions? And maybe how has it evolved even as you built Surge?
So let me give an example. Imagine you ask an AI to write an 8-line poem about the moon. If you're not thinking deeply about quality, you might be like, okay, the way I'm going to tell if this is a good poem is I'm going to see if it checks all these boxes. Is this a poem? Is it 8 lines? Does it contain a word moon? If so, sure, great. This is a great poem. But that's not how we think about quality at all. Like, we really want to create Nobel Prize winning poetry. So we think about, is this poem unique? Does it move you? Does it surprise you? Does it tug at your heart? Does it teach you something about the nature of moonlight? Like, that's the kind of quality that we look for. Like one of the things I often say is that there's an infinite ceiling to the types of quality that we want AI to learn from. Like, if you imagine people like Kazuo Ishiguro or Ernest Hemingway, and if they lived to 500, there'd be no ceiling to types of writing that they would produce. They would just keep getting better and better and better. And so that notion of quality is what we really, really strive for as well.
How do you measure quality at Surge? And what's sort of misunderstood in terms of how you measure it well and accurately?
Yeah, so we build a ton of technology here. Like, my background is as a data scientist. And so I've always really cared about having thousands of signals on every worker, every task, every project. Like, if you're a coder, we know things like how good you are at backend coding versus front-end coding. And we know how good you are at C++ versus Python. And we know how good you are at creative writing versus technical documentation. And we do all this by gathering basically thousands of signals about you and just feeding them into all these algorithms. And I think one of the interesting things is that because we measure quality so deeply, we can also run experiments that are designed to improve it. Like, we're literally running hundreds of A/B tests every single month to figure out all these ways to improve quality. And yeah, so I just think that's really important.
Interesting. I'd love to shift to talk a little bit about like the future of data and sort of what you're most excited about. What are areas of data that you're investing in, getting curious about, that you're most excited about? Because historically, Surge has been text and language based, but I'd be curious: are you expanding beyond that, and even outside of Surge, what are the most interesting areas of data?
Yeah, so I think the area I'm most excited about right now is this concept of RO environments. So an RO environment is essentially a mini world. Think of creating a video game where you have a bunch of characters with a fully fleshed out story. And then you have a bunch of businesses and tools that the characters can interact with. And then what we do is we design these very interesting, challenging tasks for models to perform within this world. And then we run the models, and then we teach the models when they're doing a good job or a bad job. And I think what's really interesting is that they really expose how weak models are sometimes at end-to-end tasks in the real world. Like, models seem very good right now. Like, they look very good at isolated instruction following and isolated tool calling. They perform very well on all these isolated benchmarks. But suddenly you throw them into these worlds where they're exposed to tools they've never seen before, or all these complex, messy, confusing Slack messages, or these longer time horizons where what the model does in step 1 affects what it's going to do in step 50. like the models just fail when you put them into these environments in really catastrophic, kind of bizarre ways. So I think our environments are just like this very, very interesting playground for models to learn from.
Yeah, I was reading one of your blogs. You were running an eval on a bunch of agentic workflows, and I thought your sort of like hierarchy of agentic capabilities was quite interesting, and how you were measuring different models against those. The other thing that's interesting, and maybe this is kind of like the common thread throughout Surge, is that the expert human is always a part of that. And I believe it's very much a part of how you build your RL environments as well, as you actually have a lot of your experts involved in that. Can you share a little bit more about how you think about it?
Yeah. So I think people often overestimate synthetic data. Like they think that synthetic data is this magical catch-all. But what they don't realize is, I mean, first of all, it's kind of obvious, but models can't really teach themselves any more than what they don't already know. And then synthetic data is also very, like it's hard to see if you just look at a couple of examples, but just not very diverse. Everything just lives on a very, very tiny slivered entire space of data. And so what we do is, instead of using synthetic data, we actually create these R environments with a lot of human loop behaviors. So we design these worlds from scratch. We create all the tasks from scratch. And then what we do is we design all these very, very interesting rewards that try to capture whether or not the model has succeeded. And so yeah, for all of it, it's a very, very intrinsic human data problem.
Beyond RL environments, are there other types of data or data collection techniques that you think are going to be really important to getting us closer to AGI?
So I'm definitely excited about our environments, but I think that there's this concept where I think a lot of people ignore what happens in the RL trajectory right now. And so this is like a big part of some of our recent blog posts. We're actually diving into what the model is doing throughout the process.
Mhm.
And I think people ignore that because they're just like, okay, yeah, we're just going to look at a final reward. We're going to look at whether it succeeds or not, et cetera, et cetera. But what you don't realize is sometimes the models can succeed, but in all these wild and crazy ways. Like again, like the models reward hacking their behavior. So I think there's this notion where we need to either pay attention more to the trajectory, or there needs to be this deeper process of reflection and refinement that I think the research community still needs to experiment with a lot more. But that's one area I'm really excited about in the future.
You guys offer like a whole host of products, right? There's a lot of RLHF, there's the RL environments you're starting to do, there's the evals and benchmarks and verifiers that you produce for customers. I'd be curious, like snapshot today, where do you see the demand from customers? What are they most interested in? How has it changed over the last few years?
Yeah, so I think the data needs have definitely evolved a bunch in the past few years. And probably the biggest shift has been in the amount of really advanced, hyper-specialized expertise that the models need. Like we've always focused on very advanced, very complex use cases. But I think in the past year, the amount of expertise that the models require has just exploded. So like actually today, most of the work that we do is in all these expert domains like advanced math, advanced coding, law, medicine, finance. And the models are just so good that the kinds of people you need to teach the models to get better in these areas, they're people like Goldman Sachs bankers with 12 years of experience, or L8 software engineers with backgrounds in machine learning and distributed systems, or Ivy League professors who are literally training the models to collaborate with them on their own research. So that's probably one of the biggest shifts. But other shifts are things like there's been a big increase in multimodality or just non-text data. And most of the data we create today is images, audio, video, coding agents, R environments. And other areas would be things like internationalization. So in the past year, we've expanded from 30 languages to over 80. And probably another big one is the time horizons that the models operate in. So I think a year ago, probably the most complex tasks we would do would take maybe on the order of 5-10 hours. But now some tasks that we do, they actually take 50 or even 100 hours to perform. So overall,
What's an example of one?
So some of the work that we do is actually really interesting. It's teach the models to basically publish frontier research. So think about something that could actually get published in a math journal. And so
It's pretty close to AGI.
Yep.
We'll come back to the timing there. Well, that's a data point. This is just a fun aside that popped in my head. My understanding is you were one of the first surgers on the platform. Do you still surge? Is that the
Yeah. So I mean,
that's the verb you use.
We should adopt surge, but I just like say work
Or hot sauce.
Yep.
Are you hot sauce?
Yeah, I actually really believe it's really important so for me and all of the company to keep working on tasks. Like, I think one of the things about us as kind of like an enterprise company, I guess, is that compared to consumer companies like Twitter or Instagram or whatnot, when you're one of those kinds of companies, you naturally use your product every single day. And so you get a very deep feel for how the product should behave and where it's still lacking. And for us, a big part of product is the worker experience. So I think it's very important for me, for others in the company, to really just try tasks themselves, both to experience what it's like to be a worker, but then also to make sure that we understand what all the frontier labs need. So actually, every week we just have a labeling party where I will go every
That's
single
amazing.
week, and it'll be this like rotation of people around the company. So I think it's all fun.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, I mean that's an important lesson for everybody, even at your scale. Like you're still pretty close to the work that's being done and to your users. Um, let's shift a little bit to like kind of the applied side. And you've spoken a bunch about kind of smart and useful AI, and obviously you serve a really important role in the value chain. But ultimately, this is the power, the types of experience that we started our talk with. Um, help us understand how you think about smart and useful, and obviously you have opinions around what you want to see come out of the data that you produce.
Yeah, so I think the difference between being smart and useful is essentially the difference between being textbook smart and street smart. So, like imagine you. Let me give you an example. Imagine you are woken up at 3 a.m. because you got paged because all your servers are down. It's like, which AI model would you prefer? Would you want an AI model that's able to regurgitate textbooks and can win programming competitions? Or do you want an AI that's been trained on millions of real world examples and can actually fix your problem so you can go back to sleep? Like, that's the difference between being smart and useful. And I think it's kind of funny because there are a lot of models out there that can win IMO gold medals now. But those same models, you give them a PDF and you ask it to parse it, and they actually fail half the time. And this goes back to what I was saying about all these benchmarks and leaderboards. Like, these benchmarks and leaderboards, they're often easily gamed and gamed in such a way that improving them doesn't necessarily improve their performance in the real world. Like, I think people think that winning IMO gold medals, for example, is hard. And yes, it's definitely hard. But what people don't realize is that they often have very objective, well-defined answers that make them easier to hill climb on than all these messy, ambiguous problems in the real world. So I think we want to make sure that we are helping our customers build models that are actually able to help real problems in the real world, as opposed to just helping them ace benchmark tests.
I like that definition. It makes me feel better about myself because I think I'm more useful than smart. Um, I guess let's come back to where we started on AGI. So you had a definition of AGI, and we do these monthly all hands with our community. And one of our little fun exercises was people were bucketing into predictions of when AGI arrives. It was like started with it's already here, next 2 years, next 10, and then like it was 30 years out or never. I don't think those were the exact buckets, but you get the point. Where would you put yourself kind of on that spectrum, and why?
So I would put myself definitely on the more longer time horizon spectrum. Like, the way I think about it is, sure, in 2 or 3 years, we'll probably get AI models that can automate 70-80% of the job of the average software engineer. But there's a big difference between going from 70-80% to 90% to 99% to 99.99%. And so I think every increment of that sort will take like another 2, 3, 5 years. And I think that's one thing that people often underestimate when they think about the time horizons.
I know we have I want to open it up for questions in a second. I have one last question. I have others, but I'll ask that. And then for those of you who have questions, think about what you want to ask. I think we've got some mics going around. But my question for you, at least to close on my part, would be, what is your vision for the future of the sort of the data layer in AI?
So when I think about AI again, I think about AI models that aren't just textbook smart, like I said before, that aren't just robotic instruction followers, but they're AI models that are creative and insightful and funny, and basically AI models that can blow your mind and really do reflect the best of humanity. And so I think that we're going to need a suite, like a suite of a million products that teach AI models in the same way that there are a million different ways that humans learn. Like, if you think about becoming a great writer, you don't become a great writer by just memorizing a bunch of grammar rules. You become a great writer by publishing a book and publishing on Amazon and seeing all the reviews. or by going to workshops and learning from other workshop participants, or by reading all these masterpieces and comparing them with all the terrible writing you see day to day. And so I think we're going to need a suite of products that basically mirror that. And then we need to build these better benchmarks and leaderboards to steer the industry in a better direction. And then we need better evaluation techniques to measure whether or not the models are doing well. And then we need fundamental research in order to understand how to do all this better. So I think there's a lot of things that we want to do.
Awesome. Let's show of hands, and then I think we've got a couple of people with mics. Let's go right here in the red. I'm excited for this because you all are smarter and more useful, so probably better questions.
Yeah, it was good for me to read today. So, so my name is Amtumbe, co-founder of Tech Startup. So I'm curious about how Saj would be dealing with problems such as, there's that experience in manufacturing where there's that guy who's like 60-something-year-old and he just listens to a machine and he figures out, okay, what's the problem? If we're thinking about AI in manufacturing for the future, as factories are getting smarter, how are we going to deal with sort of robots or systems that can deal with that kind of knowledge? That how would we get that data? Can you actually come up with synthetic data such as that, or that experience someone has for such a space? And how would you deal with that? Or if you're already dealing with it, how would you work on sensor fusion and coming up with that kind of data?
Yeah, so honestly, I think it's a space that we're still exploring. Like the whole concept of AI models that need to learn from kind of like real world interactions or real world experiments. Like historically, most of the work that we've done has been in the purely online space, purely technology space, where I think you have a lot of advantages from the internet being a source of all knowledge. And I think we haven't quite figured this out yet. So honestly, it's a thing that we're still exploring, but I think will become really important because when we build all these AG models, we do want them to interact in the real world. And I think that's important, but it's something we haven't figured out yet.
Let's go across the room. How about over there?
Hi, my name is Virgil. I'm a researcher in AI, and I want to ask about internationalization. You touched a bit about the linguistics of it, but I did a research project in which we explored the intangible cultural concepts and how they are represented in image generation. I feel like this is a growing blind spot for models, that they do not know how to represent, like, for example, a traditional mask, and that's like a fuzzy representation that doesn't belong to a specific culture. Is Surge doing something in that direction, cultural representation in AI models?
Yeah, so a big part of our internationalization work is making sure that models aren't just learning language, but they're learning all these cultural concepts as well. So like when we look for workers who work on these projects, we don't just look for language expertise. We really want people who have grown up in these individual cultures, in these individual countries, and can really speak to the cultural aspects of what they're doing.
Right down here.
Hi, thank you. I'm Shinru. I work at Google. I work a lot on the model quality, so I definitely feel the pain you mentioned. One interesting thing I recently noticed is that also want to know your ideas or opinions on. So when you have all these talented scientists or experts rating or giving answers on particular very hard questions, do you see or do you expect to see some intelligence that is emerging from interdisciplinary problems like that?
Sorry, could you rephrase your question?
So normally, like, people just rate on one type of questions, like those math PhD rate math problems, physics PhD rate on physics problems. But recently, I talked to some researchers, and they say they're sort of observing some intelligence that is emerged from like interdisciplinary tasks and data, like HLE data on that side.
Cross discipline.
Right, cross discipline.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so I definitely am a big believer in that. Like one of the things that we're always trying to make sure that we're doing is we want to make sure that we're not just siloing workers into particular projects, and we're not trying to reduce projects to very siloed, like how do I put it? So I think historically, for example, let me just give an example. Historically, one of the ways we think is really important for training models is we try to train models on this notion of overall quality. like, I think sometimes we talk to researchers and they're like, okay, no, we don't want to ask a question like, how good was this response overall? Instead, they often tell us they just want to evaluate on individual dimensions, like, was this model good at instruction following? Was it good at truthfulness? Was its writing quality good? But they never have this notion of like overall quality that captures all the holistic behaviors of response. And so we care about that. And then we also care about making sure that when you're a mathematician, we're not just going to silo you into math projects because that's what's on your resume, that's what your PhD was in. We are going to, again, like measure all of your abilities to see if you're a good writer too, or if you're good at biology, or if you have all these surprising ideas about all these other fields. And so I think both of those notions, like when you combine them, they actually do lead to this idea of expanding models' knowledge beyond these like very, very siloed containers. So I think we do see that a lot.
Let's do 2 more questions. Right down here. I'm just zigzagging.
Thanks for a great conversation. A quick question on the use of gameplay for model training, especially world models.
Sorry, the use of what?
Gameplay data.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. Like, I think of gameplay data as, I don't know, I guess there's 2 parallels. One is just sort of like a lot like pre-training, and then the other is like very similar to the R environments I mentioned, where we often just think about R environments as a game where the models are just going to iterate over and over again until they succeed at these rewards that we've defined. So yeah, I think it's been a really great, a great boon for the industry.
Faith, if you want to pick one in the back corner.
I just wanted to know that there are some modalities beside text which have human touch with them. For example, voice, right? Do you think that voice is going to be the biggest modality in terms of how humans communicate with these AI systems? And if so, where do you think we stand in terms of speech-to-speech systems at this point?
Yeah, so I definitely think it'll be one of the biggest ones. I don't know if it will be the biggest because I feel like in the future, we're going to have new computing devices that will, I don't know, maybe it'll be VR headsets, or maybe there will be these Neuralink style systems where they're almost just fundamentally new modalities compared to our phones today, where, you know, sure, you don't want to like take out your phone and show a video, but maybe you'll talk to it. So I think it will be big, but I don't know if it will be the biggest one. And in terms of where I think they are today, I think they're still not quite there. So I actually think that I'm more surprised by the quality of notebook LLM's voices. But then when I use voice mode in ChatGPT, for example, I find it often just doesn't know when I've paused, but still want to continue my question. And so it would just like interrupt me when it just pisses me off because it's really hard to have a conversation with it sometimes. Or sometimes the voices are just very unnatural and synthetic. And so I just get a little bit annoyed talking to them. But I think there still remains a lot of progress to be done. But
I feel like the best eval for the voice stuff is if you use it with kids. So I have 3 kids and we use voice mode a ton in the car. And as an adult, I kind of know how it works. So when it doesn't quite get the pause, I know what to do. But my God, if a kid is in front of it, it can really go pretty haywire and they get frustrated. I know everybody has a lot of questions, but I think we have to wrap here. I really enjoyed this, and thank you so much for coming. I feel really good about the future of AI with you being somebody who is helping provide a lot of the expert and quality data. And so thanks for being here.
yeah, thanks for having me.